Folks, I'm real excited that Kirk is able to be with us today. I heard Kirk and his son Casey probably 10 years ago when I was in a different stage of parenting, and I would imagine he was in a different stage of parenting because Casey was much younger, and now Casey's much older and has less hair, as do I. And But if you've had an opportunity to go on their website and look at kind of the story that was the genesis of this movement that kind of I'm putting words in your mouth, Kirk, but kind of broke things open or broke Kirk. It broke me too to read it because I recognize so much of my own behavior and actions toward my children, and so he started this thing called Celebrate Calm, and it really just deals with handling those conflicts and collisions within our parenting relationships that can be harmful in a way that infuses some humor and, as he says, some compassion, and makes us available to be learners and I think more gentle participants in life with our kids. And so again, Kirk, thanks for being here and sharing what you've learned and gleaned from both parenting and from listening to parents and kids over the years. So I will turn that over to you then.
Sam, thank you. Thank you. I have less hair as well. So thank you guys. Thank you for everyone who's here. I try to make things very practical. I do tend to talk really fast because I want to fit in as many things as we can in this time. So I'll give you a little bit of background of who we primarily work with how we define it. And then I'm going to do a couple situations and go through maybe 5 different steps to calm kids with big emotions, because a lot of us have kids who are kind of explosive kids. So very quickly, who we deal with tends to be the strong-willed kids. Our definition is these are kids who are very, very bright. They're not always academically motivated, but they're bright. They just tend to use their intelligence to argue with you, right? So they're kind of like these cops, judges, and attorneys all rolled into one little package. These are kids who are stove touchers. They have to touch the hot stove. If you say, if you would just do what I asked, you would be done in 7 minutes, right? You do that, and they don't do it that way, but they'd rather argue with you for 7 hours or days or weeks or years and lose everything they own because consequences don't really mean anything to them. And they have to touch the hot stove. They want to learn themselves. They want to figure it out on their own. And so that's always going to rub up against you because you're the parent, you're the teacher, you're the authority figure, and they don't want to do it your way. And if we had 3 hours, we could go into why that's such a great trait in the long run. Just makes them difficult to parent, right? But in the real world, and if any of you have noticed, these are kids who struggle in the kid world. But if you give them an adult type job, or you have, or they go over to a friend's house and they do something for another adult, they're amazing. And so they're like these little walking dichotomies. And so it's tough, and they're not always going to do things your way. So you're going to have a lot of power struggles. I'm going to try to help you today, a few tips to get out of that kind of constant battle mode that you're in with these kids. Couple other things about these kids and the way their brain's wired. And again, this is in general. It's not every one of these kids, but in general, these are kids who have very busy brains, always thinking, lots of ideas. And it feels like inside they're not in control of themselves. So you'll notice they're always trying to control situations, control other people. They're often bossy with siblings, with friends, with you. That's why you can't play board games with them, because they're going to change the rules of the game, cheat, or quit. And that's not because they're poor sports. It's because everything feels like it's out of my control. And if I'm a loser, if I lose, that makes me a loser. So when I quit, that's me controlling kind of the game. When I change the rules of the game. So you'll find a lot of these things. Anxiety, if I get time, I'll go through anxiety with kids because it's a big, big deal. So all these things are happening and it feels like they're out of control. So let's take a common situation very quickly. By the way, our background, as Sam mentioned, we have our son Casey's very strong-willed. He's 30 now. So you get to see the strong will when he's a kid is really irritating. And when he's an adult, it helps them kill it in life. And you see all these traits, and it's a great advantage. But over the course of a decade, we had about 1,500 kids actually come into our home. We didn't want to do, my wife's a therapist, but we didn't want to do one-on-one therapy because oftentimes it's futile with kids because they just say, I don't know, or they manipulate the therapist because they're really smart. So we wanted kids in our house where we could teach them in the moment how to deal with your frustration, how to deal with disappointment, how to deal with your anxiety. So I hope you do find that this is practical. Let me go through 5 steps to calm kids with big emotions, and then I'll do maybe 2 examples to put them all into place. So number one thing, this is really important mindset shift. So a kid's getting upset, right? And so our first thought is, I need to calm him down or her. But how many of you have found when you're upset, one of the worst things anybody can ever tell you is, hey, you know what? You just need to calm down. And you're like, you know what you need to do? Right? Because nobody likes to be told to calm down. So when you're approaching a child, whether you're a teacher, a parent, whatever your role is, instead of my first thought being, I need to calm that child down, I switch in my head to, I need to give that child something he or she is in control of, because it's the lack of control that causes the outburst. It is the last minute change in plans. It's the disappointment. If I had a vision in my head of how I wanted this to work and it's not working that way, and now everything's ruined and you don't understand, and they start going and we're like, calm down, and that makes things worse. So I like to give them something they're in control of. If you want to think about this in your own life, I do this kind of as a joke, but it's true. If any of you at night, especially before bed, you go to your kitchen and you clean your kitchen sink, right? You make sure there's nothing in there. It's spotless. And what's kind of behind that is the rest of my life is out of my control because I can't control my spouse or my kids, but my sink is spotless. And you go to bed feeling like something is in order. So I hope why I tell that is, what's the kitchen sink activity for your child when he or she is upset? Here's a quick little aside. So we'd have kids come to our house. A lot of times they were after school because we do homework with them because their parents didn't want to do homework with them because it was a fight. And so a kid would come in and he'd start being bossy. Why? Because he was at school all day, and school is all out of my control. It's someone else telling me what to do all day long. And he'd start bossing me around and start getting upset. And I would stop, and instead of saying, hey, stop being a bossy little jerk, right? Because that's just reacting to the outward behavior. What I try to do is figure out what's going on inside that heart, inside that brain. And I said, oh, you know what I need some help with? Could you go to the basement? I've got a broom and it's broken. Could you find some duct tape? You could be a little MacGyver, fix that broom for me. Because these kids like doing things with their hands. They're often very good at tinkering with things. That's why they push your buttons, because they're tinkering with your brain, because they know all of your buttons, which is a huge gift to you if you can embrace that, because they're going to point out all of your weaknesses as a parent and all of your childhood trauma that you have. It's just going to come out. And so what I was giving that child, instead of correcting his behavior and telling him, hey, you just need to calm down, I gave him something he was in control of, something he was good at doing. For classroom behavior, one of my favorite things is I create successes. So in that situation, instead of correcting that child, I created a success because I knew he was good at fixing the broom. He felt like he was in control of something. He brought it back. And I'm like, isn't that cool? 5 minutes ago, you were out of control. And right now you're not. And so in that moment, what I'm able to do is teach him, there's nothing wrong with being frustrated and disappointed. That's a part of life. I normalize those things. Of course you were being bossy. All day long, you were at school and people were bossing you around and you feel like you don't have any control over your life. I'm not thrown off by that, but here's what you do about that. You learn how to control yourself. So anyway, first step is shift the mindset from, I need to calm that child down, to get that child something he's in control of. And again, I'll do some full examples in a minute. Number 2, control yourself first. The quickest way to change a child's behavior is to first control your own. And you've seen this. If you walk into a room, if you march into a room, hands on your hips, or if you're a dad like I was, My dad was career military, so I learned fear and intimidation, my way or the highway approach. So I learned how to walk into a room, start asserting my authority, which was really, in that case, I was just provoking fear in my son and a defensive response. So we could spend 6 hours on controlling ourselves, but let me give you one tip that's really important for the strong-willed child. It's tone of voice. Tone of voice is extremely important for the strong-willed child. There is, nowadays, there are parents who have shifted because they grew up like I did with an authoritarian yelling parent. And we've kind of shifted a little bit too far over where, sweetie, mommy really needs your help. And that really, really sweet tone tends not to work for the strong-willed child because it sounds condescending to them. It actually in some ways sounds disrespectful, because any of you with strong-willed kids, if they're 4, you're like, she's 4 going on 34, right? They're very much in tune with the adult world. That really sweet tone sounds a little condescending and weak to them. And I'm not being funny with this. I would not recommend referring to yourself as mommy or daddy when giving instructions to a strong-willed child. They hear it as weakness. Now, I don't go there. I don't go with a pleading tone. You know what? After all I do for you, all I'm asking for is a little bit of help around here, because that's also weakness, and that's you doing too much for your child. And that's probably a generational pattern that you got from your parents. So I want you to break that. On the other spectrum is what I learned, which is you better get your little butt in the car right now. The fear and intimidation, you better do it or else, yelling and screaming. That doesn't work either. Because as soon as I get visibly irritated, here's what your child knows. If I just push dad's buttons a little bit, he's going to lose it. And as soon as dad or mom are out of control, I'm in complete control. And these are kind of fight or flight kids anyway. So many of your kids, the more you ramp up, they just ramp up with you. They're like, bring it, dad, I'm game. And they're like 6, and they will so own you, because you're going to lose your emotion, get out of control, and they won't be. So watch right in between sweetie baby and screaming and yelling is this. It's even matter-of-fact tone. It's me in control of myself. It is a very grounding tone. In fact, I've just heard on a podcast that there's something happens with this very low-key tone that actually trips a neurological response in the hearer's system that overpowers whatever their normal response would be. It is this tone of voice that says, I'm in complete control of myself. I've seen this before. I'm not going to lose it, but I'm also not going to beg you. So I hope that makes sense. I will model this throughout my examples, but it is a very, very important tone of voice. And some of you, I would encourage you, because you're very sweet people, right? My wife struggled with this forever. Well, that just sounds very cold. I know it does. But what the child hears is, I'm in control, I'm not going to react to you, and I can help you out. And so practice it in the car. Practice it when you're driving, because I did this with 1,500 kids, and I came about that. To be honest, I discovered this just working with these kids. They'd be out of control in my home, and I don't like a lot of noise. And I tried the really sweet way, and I tried the tough way. And what I found was when I sat down and said, sounds to me like you're frustrated. And like, yeah, because Joey stole my Legos. Yeah, I'd be frustrated too. I don't like Joey stealing my Legos either. So what are we going to do about it? Right? Because you could hit him if you want, but then you're just going to lose pool this afternoon. That's not going to work. And so I started talking to them in this problem solving tone. And it's very grounded. So work on controlling yourself first. Number 3, motion changes emotion. One of our favorite tools for getting kids to calm down is not talking to them. Talking a lot makes kids more upset. You've probably noticed that. Honey, let's talk about your feelings. They're like, I don't want to talk about my feelings. And what they really want is, I don't need so much to identify my feelings as to know what to do with those feelings. See, we try to get a lot, honey, do you want to draw a picture? Do you want to talk about your emotions or identify them? And there's nothing really wrong with that. But in the moment, the truth is, I usually know what their emotions are. Hey, I can tell you're frustrated. I can tell you're disappointed. I could tell something's going on. There's anxiety. Let me give you some tools to deal with those emotions. See, that's grounding. Or when we talk too much and we lecture a lot, it makes kids angry. For me, it's provoking kids to anger. So the reason I like movement is movement changes things. So it's motion changes emotion. I get them moving and doing something, and it's a way for them to work off a little bit of that frustration. And by the way, while we're doing that, we're not giving eye contact. And this may rub some of you the wrong way, and that's okay. Just wrestle with this. I tend not to give eye contact to kids when they're really upset. And here's why. A child does something wrong, throws something, calls you a name, hits his sister or her brother, whatever it is. And then they know it's wrong. And they go into kind of a shame mode. And that's the exact moment where we say, hey, we need to look at me. We need to talk about your attitude and your behavior. And they've got all this shame on them. It is a truth that I have found that people don't like being watched when they're struggling, right? We live out west now. I was doing up on this hike with us, and I met this couple, and they weren't from here, so I kind of led them up this mountain. And the guy's wife was really struggling because they're not used to the elevation. And he kept turning around saying, honey, are you okay? And she finally said, if you ask me that one more time, I'm going to throw you off this mountain. So I said, dude, here's what I found in life. People like being watched when they're struggling. Let's hike up ahead. And then she can struggle without being watched is a really important concept. And I'll put this together in a couple examples in a minute. But I don't give a lot of eye contact when kids are upset. The other reason I don't do a lot of eye contact during negative times is because as a dad, the only time I used to give my son eye contact was when he was in trouble. Hey, son, look at me when I'm talking to you. So they associate eye contact with I'm in trouble, and it's intimidating. I tend to save eye contact for when kids have made a good choice. Hey, Sam, you know what? It's a good choice, my friend. Fist bump shows me you're growing up. That's when I give eye contact. So the motion part of it, whether it's an older child and they're really upset, and I said, hey, listen, I forgot something. I've got to run up to the store. You want to run up there with me? We can grab a snack together. Well, now we're riding together in the car next to each other. And it's much easier to open up when you're doing that. So I'll come back and do a couple examples on the motion changes emotion. Intensity, number 4, intensity. Again, this is counterintuitive. You have very intense kids, and when they get upset, they get really intense. So let me give you an example of how to use this. And by the way, if you have kids who are adopted, kids from foster care, kids who have any kind of attachment issues, think about this for a minute. These kids associate intensity with connection. But what they don't distinguish between is positive attention or negative. All they know is if I do something wrong and an adult comes in the room and puts down their iPhone and starts yelling at me, at least that's connection, right? That's what they associate, because in your marriage, the worst part of marriage is not that you're fighting. The worst part would be if you don't even care enough to fight anymore, right? And you've withdrawn from each other. That absence of anything, that's hard. So just keep that in mind, that I like to give kids intensity when they're doing things well. I want to train that brain. Hey, good choice. Really proud of you. By the way, strong-willed kids, short and sweet praise. Don't go on and on. We're so proud of you. We're so happy, because it sounds condescending, like we never thought you'd actually make a good choice and you just did. So it's short and sweet, and then I move on. So let me do this example. So let's say there's a kid and he just built a paper airplane. He comes home from school and he's like, I want to make a paper airplane, because I like to fidget with things and make things. And he flies the paper airplane, and it doesn't fly the way he wanted it to. What's going to happen? He's going to pick it up and start crumpling it up. Stupid airplane. I'm an idiot. And he starts going on. And as a parent, every good mom and dad will come in the room and say, honey, that was a good airplane. Wrong answer, right? Because here's what they're thinking. Duh, if it were a good airplane, it would have flown the right way. And it makes things worse. It is sometimes, see, that sweet tone at times sounds dismissive. It sounds like me as a husband telling my wife, oh, honey, there's no need to be upset, right? You're just overreacting, which in what I really should say is, honey, I'm a man. The truth is, I'm just uncomfortable with your emotions and I don't know what to do and I feel helpless to fix it. So I dismiss it and hope that it just goes away. That's the more honest response as a man. And that's why as men and women, I don't like dismissing people's emotions. Honey, of course you're frustrated. You should be frustrated, right? You're married to me. We have a lot going on. You should be frustrated. I don't have to fix people's emotions. That's a very liberating thing. It's not my job to fix my child's emotion, to fix my wife's emotion. It's very liberating for me and for them. So instead, in this situation, I'm going to come in with some intensity. So he's screaming, this is stupid. And I come and say, you know what? If I were you, I'd be frustrated too. You know what? You spent a lot of time trying to make that airplane didn't fly right. That's frustrating. See, there's something very validating about that of like, oh, it is? Yes. I'm not thrown off by your frustration. You should be frustrated because you care about something and it didn't turn out the right way. Now, watch what I didn't say. So go hit your sister, go punch a hole in the wall. I didn't say that. I just said, you should be frustrated because that's frustrating. See, we get into that mode of like, I need to calm him down. I don't want my son to be upset. And instead, I'm trying to figure out, oh, of course you're upset. I normalize it. And then space is really important. Hey, you know what? And watch the tone. I'm coming in with some intensity. If I were you, and see how even it is. See, you know what? If I were you, I'd be frustrated too, because he's intense and now I'm intense. When I come in with like, oh, honey, it's okay. That was a good airplane. What it feels like is you're not taking me seriously. And I know that's hard as a parent because you're like, it's a stupid airplane, duh, just make another one. But that's not how the strong-willed child thinks. He threw himself into that and it didn't work. So to him, to your child, that is the most important thing in that moment. And I'm validating, should be frustrated. Listen, I need to go to the bathroom. I need to get some water. When I get back, let's figure out how to do this better next time. Let's problem solve. Because that also says, hey, I'm willing to work on this with you because yeah, that didn't work. Let's work on that. The space of I need to go to the bathroom. I need to get some water. I give my child a minute or two to calm him or herself down without me being in the room staring at the child. Right? Because that's, if you as a parent, which you have, if you're a normal human being, when you've lost it with your child and you start going off about your childhood and after all I do for you, at the end of that, don't you feel silly? You feel ashamed. And now your kids are looking at you like, what happened to you, Dad? You're like 45 and run a company, but you can't handle it when there are Legos on the floor. And then you're embarrassed. You don't want your family watching you. Hey, let's watch Dad go from being really upset to being in control of himself. That's horribly difficult. And that's why we get embarrassed as dads and we end up withdrawing. So I remove myself, I give him some space. And then when I come back in, I'm like, okay, what are we going to do about that? Because that says I'm in here with you and I'm problem solving. So that part, that intensity part, really, really interesting how that works. And I just mentioned number 5. I almost did number 4. Number 5 is space. Give your kids some space when they're upset. I use this example sometimes of a mom and daughter, and the daughter is riding horses because many of the kids we work with, they're not great with their peers. They struggle with kids their own age, but they tend to be better with little kids, with animals, with older people. And so a great therapy is to get them out just working with animals. So this little girl there in a barn, and she's putting on her riding boots. But if any of you have kids like this, they're very particular about things. And so on certain days, their socks don't feel right. And then they throw it, and there's a meltdown over, why can't I wear the same hoodie sweatshirt I've worn for 17 straight days? And so the daughter started wrestling with her boots. And of course, she starts saying, stupid riding boots. And mom gets offended. And I encourage you, don't take things personally. You're grown adults. They're kids. Stop taking everything personally and giving them so much power over you. they're kids. It doesn't mean it's right. It's just that she's a 6-year-old kid, an 8-year-old kid who can't get her riding boots on. So mom's like, you know what? If you're not going to treat your riding boots with respect, I paid $145 for each one of those boots. You're never going to ride again. Well, what happens then? Then the daughter throws the boots into the cow poop, and then the whole day is ruined, right? Instead, if mom were to fake getting a phone call, hey, honey, I'm getting a call. I've got to step outside the barn. I'll be back in a minute. That little daughter, her daughter, will get her boots on, but she's going to wrestle with it and she's going to verbalize, you stupid riding boots, but nobody's there reacting to it. And when you walk back in, you can say, have a good time, honey. I hope that makes sense. The space part, really important. So let's put this together in, let me see how I'm doing on time. I'll try to do 2 examples. Quick one, anxiety issues. If any of you have kids who struggle with anxiety, going to new places can be brutally tough because you're like, hey, do you want to take Taekwondo this fall? And they're like, sure, sign me up. You come home a couple of weeks later. Hey, Brandon, we've got Taekwondo tonight. And we get it. What? My stomach's kind of upset. Can we just stay home tonight? I promise I'll go next week. And we're like, no. I paid it, right? If we just go right now, stop at McDonald's, we'll get a Happy Meal, right? We try to bribe our kids. That doesn't work. We try to convince them. That doesn't work. And then we finally say, you know what? I paid $175 for that class. Your little butt's going to be there. Get in the car. And that produces a big power struggle. And they eventually say, no, I'm not going. Taekwondo's stupid. You're stupid. And they end up blowing up. And if you read that as defiance and disrespect, your only response is fear and intimidation. Get in the car or else, or go to your room, no food or video games for the next week, because that's a good guy consequence. We give consequences we can't keep. I did that all the time. So we're reading it the wrong way. That's an anxiety issue, because here's what triggers in the child's brain when I come home. Hey, Brandon, Taekwondo tonight, all the unknowns. It's the unknowns that cause anxiety. Have I ever been to the Taekwondo place? Is it going to be loud in there? Is the instructor going to be nice? Or the other kid's going to pick on me? I'm not good at multiple step processes. What if I'm not good at Taekwondo and I want to quit? Is dad going to call me a quitter? And all these unknowns add up and that anxiety hits them. And all they know is, I have to get out of doing this. So they're bright. So here's what they do. You're stupid. I hate you. Because that guarantees go to your room. See, I'm safe in my room. I'm used to being in my bedroom. I hoard food up there. I've got HBO you don't know about. I've got all kinds of stuff in my room. But don't make me go to that new place where I could get rejected or I might fail. So when you start to learn how to control yourself in the moment and understand how their brains work, these situations that used to be 4 hours of fighting, you can turn it into actually a teaching opportunity. Because discipline literally means to teach. It doesn't mean to punish, it means to teach. And now I get to look down at my child in that moment when he's screaming at me and saying, hey, is your stomach a little bit upset? He's like, oh, just anxiety, you're just nervous. Of course. So 2 steps here. 1, normalize it. Of course you're nervous. You should be nervous. You're going to a new place where you've never been. You don't know anybody there, and you don't know what's going to happen. It's a very normal thing to feel nervous about that. And if you put it in your own context, hey, sometimes I have to give presentations at the office. Guess what? My stomach gets a little bit upset. Why? Because I'm afraid of what the reaction is going to be to my presentation. Normalize this. We're doing a disservice in our society where the adults and the therapists are acting as if anxiety is something that's just debilitating. Now, if your child has debilitating anxiety, then they should see a therapist. But most of our kids, it interrupts their life, as it does mine. I'm 57, but I've learned how to deal with it. But we have look, if you have and again, we're into therapy. My wife's a therapist. But if you take a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl or 10-year-old girl, hey, honey, why don't we go talk to a therapist every week about your anxiety? You're going to create a lot of anxiety. What our society needs is us as adults to say, your anxiety is normal. If you're a teenager, you should feel awkward. It's middle school is the most awkward time of your life. Nobody wants to go back to middle school. It's hard. You're not a little kid, but you're not a big kid. You got all these hormones. Of course you feel like that. Oh, so it's normal that I feel like that? Yes. There's nothing wrong with that. You shouldn't look for some of your kids. You shouldn't want to go to this new place. It's scary. I get it. That alone is very calming because watch what we do sometimes. You know what? It's only a 45-minute class. Your brother never has any issues going to that class. Well, now they start to internalize, well, if it's not hard, then maybe something's wrong with me. And I don't want kids to internalize that there's something wrong with them when they have a very natural thing like anxiety. Anxiety is a normal, healthy thing that alerts you to things being out of your control. What I don't want to do is have them miss Taekwondo because of it. So the second tool that I use there is this, and I'm trying to do a shortcut version, is I would go to the Taekwondo place 3 days, 5 days ahead of time, and let your child just sit there and observe and watch it and soak up the sounds and what's going on while you're eating a snack when there's no pressure to perform. I can't say the word. Familiarity is really important for these kids. And I do this. This is the kind of magical thing. Go to the Taekwondo instructor and say, hey, Mr. Taekwondo, son's going to be, or daughter's going to be in your class on Thursday nights. My son loves helping other people. Could you give him a job to do? And Taekwondo guy says, psyched, you're going to be in my class, Jason. Listen, Thursday night, I need you here 5 minutes early. When you come in, you're going to rearrange the mat, set up the cones. You're going to help me out. You up for that? Most of your kids, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. They love being helpful to other people. So when Thursday night comes and I say, hey, Taekwondo tonight, what triggers in the brain is not all the unknowns. Mom, Dad, remember Taekwondo guy said he needed my help. He said be there 5 minutes early, so we have to leave like 3.5 hours early so we're not late. That switching a situation that usually causes a big meltdown and me screaming, yelling into, I just taught my child that for the rest of his or her life, they know how to handle anxiety. And that's a beautiful thing. One more example, and then we'll do Q&A, if everybody's okay with that. And even if you're not, I'm in control. So I'm just going to do this. So that's the wonderful thing about this. Look, I often on our podcast, we have a thing, it's the Calm Parenting Podcast, if you ever want to listen. Parents always email like, my child just wants to be in control. And I was like, that only bothers you because you want to be in control. We all have control issues. It's the way we're made. It's just whether you can learn to control them so they don't try to dictate things to other people. But don't worry about the control issues things. Just work on all of your own, and that'll take the rest of your life, like for me. So quick example. This is real life. My son, I would walk into a room, walk into the house. Casey's yelling at my wife. Typical response for me to walk in as the dad. You know what, Casey? How many times have I told you, you don't yell at your mother? And then I would lay into him for everything. Legos all over the floor. You don't get your assignments done. Why isn't your trash taken out? And then I would get personal. How are you ever going to be successful in life if you can't follow simple instructions? Why are you so defiant? When I was a kid, and I would ramp things up. 2 reasons. One is this. I was resentful toward Casey when he was little because he was difficult, until I realized that I was the difficult one and he got most of those traits from me. And he was so like me that I wanted to fix him because I didn't want him to repeat all the mistakes in life that I had made. So I was actually tougher on him because he was just like me. Some of you, it's tough because your kids are so different from you and you might be like a compliant rule follower, and that's awesome in life. And you have no idea how you have a child who looks at you and says, no, and they don't care about the consequences. And so I would do it for that reason. And I purposefully, without knowing, was escalating things with my son because I would keep pushing him. You know what? One more word, young man. Keep it up. Keep it up. You already lost your video games for 1 week. You want to make it 2? And the strong-willed child is going to be like, let's just make it 4, Dad. And they'll call your bluff because they know that you won't take it away for a month because you rely on their video games to keep them occupied. It's just truth. No judgment. So I would ramp things up until he finally called me a name, went up to his room and slammed his door so that I would feel justified telling my wife, did you hear what your son just said to me? But I was the adult. I escalated things. I provoked things. And there's no blame or guilt in anything that we do. I just like to own my own stuff. The truth is, in that moment, what I was telling my son was this: Casey, I need you to behave, because if you don't behave and do exactly what I tell you right now, I'm not sure I can behave, and you do not want to see me angry. See, I was dependent on my son behaving and doing exactly what I wanted. Otherwise, I would lose it. And so I want to change that dynamic. So quick solution. There are hundreds of them here, but this is that motion changes emotion, controlling myself. Instead of walking in and escalating, I walk into the kitchen, and while I'm passing by, I say, hey, Case, I can tell you're frustrated. Listen, I'm going to go outside. I was holding a football. If you want to come out, when you're ready, if you want to come out, I'll play catch with you, help you with whatever you're struggling with. Hey, Case, I can tell you're frustrated. Listen, I'm going to go dump the Legos down on the floor. When you're ready, if you want to come build a spaceship with me, man, we could do a really cool spaceship. I was inviting him into an activity. I was giving him something he was in control of, building with Legos. If you're a busy parent, you're cooking dinner with 3 kids, you can't just go play football. But one of your children is upset. You can say, oh man, if I were you, I'd be frustrated too. I hate when frustrated. Do me a favor. Could you go in the pantry? Could you grab some spaghetti sauce and get that top open for me? It doesn't always work, but now I've got them moving, and now I've got them getting something open. It's physical, it's sensory. So no matter what it is, whether you're coloring with your child, whether you're building with Legos, doing something physical with them, when I walk into the room, I'm acknowledging that they're upset, but then I'm inviting them into a different place. There's motion. I'm in a different place. I'm not, we need to talk about your attitude right now, young man. Like, this never worked in the history of the world. But moving to another place, sitting down, changing my posture. One of the important parts, and I'll stop with this, I know there's a lot more we could do, but I want to get to questions. When I'm inviting them into that place, think how different it is from the usual thing we do. You know what? You need to go to your room for the rest of the night. We often send our kids away from us. And for those of you who are people of faith, it begins to send this message that God gets mad at me and sends me away from him. And what I wanted to counter is, when you're upset, I want you with me. Come play catch. Let's build with Legos. Let's run up to the store. Hey, you want to go to Taco Bell? Because I've heard they've got like grass-fed beef now. They don't, but if you tell yourself that, it makes you feel better about it. But you want to go grab a taco with me? What teenager doesn't want to go grab a taco with you? Right? And now I'm like, well, are you rewarding them for getting upset? No, because this is different. This is a child who is melting down, who's not rational anymore. Right? If they start doing like, I'm going to get upset, so my dad buys me tacos, I'm going to be like, I'm smarter than that, dude. Not going to work. This is when they're out of control. I'm moving with them. In our words, I'm leading them to a place of calm. They're following me. And now when I'm with them, what I've communicated, and I'll end with this, is when your world is out of control, mine's not. I can handle you at your worst, because I want kids to know, especially in the teenage years, when they're struggling, hey, I can handle, bring it to me, because I'm not going to overreact. I can handle that. I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to stop right there. I go on for 6 hours, but I'm trying to be very good. So we've got some time. So any questions, and it can be unrelated to this, but any questions? And if not, I've got more examples.
Yeah, if you want to drop questions in the chat, we can bring those to Kirk's attention, or if you want to just unmute and ask it out loud, you can do that as well. Kirk, I've got one just
Okay.
from my experience. If we have a child who tends to repeatedly melt down and play the blame game, not necessarily turning the blame on the parents, but on everybody else, and that seems to be their MO when they experience angst. Do you have like a trick to kind of, other than just acknowledge their frustration, and that must be frustrating? Do you have kind of a trick or tip to kind of deal with or enter into that conversation in a way that may reframe the situation?
Yes, really good question. So I think in this case, Sam, and a lot of us have those kids who won't take responsibility for their actions. So I'm gonna broaden this a little bit and then kind of bring it down. And so two ways this manifests is kids who lie a lot. Let me hit this really quickly, because strong-willed kids lie a lot. And what I want you to know as parents, as teachers, is it's not usually an integrity issue. It's simply this: I'm an impulsive, emotional kid. I get a vision for something in my brain and I want to carry it out. And they go carry it out, and then they get in trouble for it. What does human nature say? When you get called on something, what do? Look, if you're a person of faith, then we do scripture. Even if you're not a person of faith, one of the very first ancient text stories was about an authority figure who told a guy, you can eat from every tree, but not this one. And the guy ate from the tree. And so the authority figure, God comes and says like, Adam, what's up with that? And he said, this woman who you put here, I just read that recently. I forgot about that. He said, this woman who you put here with me made me eat from the tree. It's human nature because we're ashamed of our behavior. So don't get thrown off by the line. It's also related to what Sam asked, and I'll give the same solution to both. A child who's kind of blaming others and not taking responsibility is largely a child who feels helpless to change and who also doesn't have a lot of confidence. See, if you don't feel confident in yourself, what do? I'm a kid, I'm going to blame other people, because it's really hard, even as adults, to say, hey, you know why I messed up? Because I was immature and I made a bad decision. Like, that's a really hard thing to say as a human being. So I'd say the root or the answer to both of those situations is begin creating successes. You have strong-willed kids who, in many cases, are just on red on that behavior chart every day, right? Because they're not good always at following directions. And their day is, Jacob, sit down. Jacob, get back in your seat. Jacob, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. And they begin to internalize, I'm a bad kid, I'm a dumb kid. And then if you don't feel good about yourself, you're always going to blame someone else. That's what you do. Or in the case of a sibling, one of the other first stories, ancient stories, is one kid who doesn't feel good about himself compared to his brother murders his brother. That was before video games and weapons. It's in the human heart. So that's partly why I like to normalize behavior, right? Like I can't believe that my child did that. I can, because kids have done that since the beginning of time. Don't get thrown off by that. So this phrase, creating successes, quick one, in the classroom. I've got a child who struggles. I have a child who struggles to sit still all day long. Normal to me. So we have two options. We correct that child every time he gets up. If you keep getting up, if you can't sit in your seat, you're going to lose recess. And that's traditional kind of, we react to the outward behavior and punish. Well, it tends not to work. But if I know that this child, I'm just going to use you as an example, Sam, because you're there and I can reference you and say, if I know that Sam's in my class and his leg is bouncing all the time, I'm going to pull him aside. Sam, I could really use your help. You know why? Because I can tell you're a go-getter. You got a lot of energy. I need your help because when I'm teaching in class, my mouth gets really dry and I know you need to move. I don't have to put a diagnosis on a kid. I don't have to say it's clear that you have ADHD. I don't need that. Just notice that he's moving a lot. No, you need to move. So Sam, you and I are going to have a secret signal. When I do this or do this, here's what I want you to do. You get up out of your seat, you come up to my desk, you grab my water bottle, you take it to the back of the room, refill it with water, sit it on my desk. You're not going to talk to anybody. You're not going to distract anybody. You're going to be Mr. Invisible. You up for that? Little kids love that. Middle school kids will get beat up for being Mr. Invisible. So you leave that part out, right? But what I've just done is I've just recognized my child, this student, struggles in this area. And I take it out of the, if you don't stop doing that, because that's never worked since in the history of mankind too. I know you have a need that needs to be met, and I'm going to help you do that. And watch, this is important, within my boundaries. I didn't say, hey, Sam, I know that you struggle to sit, so whenever you want, just run around the classroom. I didn't say that. He's doing it within my boundaries. I created a success because when I give him that signal and he comes up and refills the water bottle, it takes like 32 seconds to do it. But I gave him 32 seconds of movement within my boundaries. And then I'm able to say then, hey, nice job. Thank you, Sam. And then he sits down. That's an idea of creating successes. Begin with your kids. For some of you, for those of you with kids who struggle with this week, I want you to set them up for success. Get them doing things they're naturally good at doing, small little things, and then come in with the affirmation, hey, really nice job doing that. Fist bump, shows me you're growing up. Sam, I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes great sense. I really like that. There's two questions that popped up in the chat here, and I'd like to get to both of them. Parent says, you advise to give an out of control or angry kid something to control. For a child who explodes on a daily basis after school, what are examples of how a parent can routinely provide them something to control? So kind of, I mean, you kind of got into that, but if you take it out of the classroom and put it into the home, do you have just a quick example of something they can do, maybe akin to the fixing the broom thing?
Yeah. So kids who come home from school, this is really common. I held it together all day long. Now I come home and now they tend to blow up on whoever's home. A lot of times it's mom, so mom gets the brunt of this. I would do, depending on the age of the child, treasure hunts. Treasure hunts are awesome because all kids love treasure hunts. And even when you're getting into snowy January, if you have snow, I don't care. When they come home from school, hey, I hid your favorite toy, or I hid a snack outside. Bet you can't find it in the basement. Hide something. Get them, because now they're problem solving. And these kids tend to be pretty good at problem solving things. I would do that probably first thing to help them decompress. I don't love kids coming home and getting on screens. I know that helps them decompress, but it's nearly impossible once they get onto the screen to get them off of the screen. So hiding something, giving a challenge. If you have an older child and you're picking them up from school, right, a teenager, middle school child, then my conversation, instead of asking about their day, right, I don't ask about their school day if they don't really like school, right? How is it that place where you're on red on the behavior chart and you don't have any friends? How is it today? Like, there's no good answer. Or a teenager, hey, do you have any homework? Nope, got it all done in study hall. Well, they just lied to you. So, and you made them lie kind of by asking, don't ask those questions. So instead, when I pick them up or I see them and say, hey, you know what, something happened to me today at the office, at the grocery store. I'm curious, what would you do if you were in my situation? See, all day long at school, they're being peppered with questions and being told kind of what to do, because that's what you do at school. Now I'm asking their opinion on it. It gives them a sense of control. So mom, dad, whoever asked that, after school, I want a series of things. Physical things outside are awesome. Most kids love treasure hunts. By the way, if your kids struggle getting up in the morning, I know you'll laugh at this, but it works really well. I wake child up and say, hey, guess where I hid breakfast? Out in the obstacle course. Bet you can't find it. So many of your kids, they won't even get dressed. They'll go outside looking, and they will sit happily outside eating their breakfast while you and your easy compliant kids get to be inside enjoying breakfast without the strong-willed child ruining that time for you. It works for everybody. And I encourage parents, Sam, I know we'll run out of time, but I do want to encourage you, no blame and guilt in any of this. Do what works for you. You're going to be judged by other people because they don't understand what it's like to have a power struggle with a strong-willed child over literally everything. And I want to free you to know that all of these things are very normal, and you're not a bad parent. You're not doing anything wrong, unless you're yelling, then you're doing that wrong. So stop it. But you know what I mean? Give yourself some grace here in that. The other question was, what do you do if you have 15 kids like that all in one group?
Yeah, just Kirk, just quickly, just to give some context. So Allison works in youth ministry, and so this is potentially 15 of those kids who need the ear tug or the nose tap to let them know they can move, and they're all together in one space. So how can you speak some wisdom into that situation?
Okay, here's what I would try. Now I know this is hard, but at least you make a lot of money being a youth pastor. So that's how we started. I'm just kidding. We started as youth pastors. That's actually how we met. So that was our first. So here's what I try. I try finding one or two kids in that group, pick them off and give them some kind of special job, make them into leaders. It's really hard for an adult to get 15 teens or 15 other kids to listen to you because you're not cool. What I try to do, you're cool. I can tell. I can see you're cool, but not to a teenager or a young kid. I try to pull a couple kids aside and say, you know what? Especially the kids who are the disruptive ones. Pull them aside and say, you know what? I see leadership in you. See, right now, you're being disruptive and you're acting silly and you're doing stuff because you want other kids to laugh. I get that, because everybody wants to be kind of thought of as the funny kid, but you know what? It's not leadership, right? You're actually needing them to follow. And I don't want to do like a long talk with them, but if you want to be a leader in my youth group, here's what I could really use some help with. Maybe give one or two of them an adult type job, because kids will gravitate to those kids and they may just follow. I may start youth group with listening to them. And so, because you're going to come in with like, today's lesson, I really want to reinforce this lesson. Sometimes, you know what I was thinking about, Allison, is we did youth ministry, and I just told my wife this the other night. If I were to go back knowing what I know now, what I would have done in my youth group every night was simply that, because I always had the lesson plan, right? Like I want to get this theme, so you get this as a teenager. I would just simply do this. I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad you're here. You're loved, you're appreciated. God loves you. God sees good things in you. And if that's all I got accomplished, kids today growing up with all the ick and all the social media around them, this is just my own personal thing for you, Allison. Release yourself from thinking that you have to get through whatever that lesson is that you had planned, because what you are really there is, I'd listen to them, because they'll be able to tell you things that they can't tell their parents. And you can impart wisdom, and it won't have anything to do with whatever your plan was for the night. One kid will start talking about how he or she is struggling with something, and they'll all want to hear, and they'll get to that. And if they have a good place where they can be heard, and it's a safe place to share, and they walk away and they know, I feel important and I feel loved. And that lady, every time I go there, she says, I'm really glad you're here. That's almost enough nowadays. And that's what I would do if I went back. And then it releases you from that, like, I've got to have control over. You're not getting control over a group of 15 kids. I don't have a good thing to tell you unless you slip things into their drinks, right? Or you do something else, knock them out. But release yourself from that. And instead roll with that energy. But see if you can get a couple teen leaders. But I think in retrospect now, I would have spent more time just giving them an opportunity to talk freely and impart my life wisdom to what was coming up in them, instead of me trying to force a lesson from the outside onto them. Anyway, however you want it, but good luck with that. And I would ask for a raise as well.
Me too. Kirk, I really appreciate you spending time and giving us so much good stuff, and being vulnerable as well. Do you have a 60-second soundbite before we take a little break?
60-second soundbite would be
final thoughts.
I'd like to end on this one, Sam, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. Very honored to do that. And I remember we went to church there when we lived in Greensboro. We went to church there. That was our home church. Mm-hmm. So I remember exactly where that is. I remember the fights on Sunday morning, right? Because many of you, the biggest fight is Sunday morning. And it's when you least act like Jesus on the way to church. We're going to church to worship God. You need to be on your best behavior. You're like, is that the fruit of the Spirit, Dad? Screaming, yelling. So I always leave with this: enjoy your strong-willed child. I promise so many of the things that irritate you right now, one, they're probably your issue coming up, so deal with that. And two, you're going to appreciate those qualities as they get older. So just enjoy them. If some of you were afraid to ask a question there, feel free to email us. It's Kirk, K-I-R-K, @celebratecalm.com, or listen to the Calm Parenting Podcast. We've got, I think, 300 episodes on different topics. And feel free to reach out. Just tell us you met us through here, and then I'll answer your question more quickly, because Sam's a good guy. Thank you all.
Thank you very, very much.
Your day. These are good sessions we've got ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.